Hi, family. How are you guys doing? I always say that like I'm expecting you guys to tell me back how you're feeling. And I actually genuinely mean that. How are you feeling today? I don't know. Type that down in the comments how you're feeling in this moment, in this hour. If it's not great, I'm seeing so many people comment things and other people are like joining in or, praying for them or covering them in a certain way. And so, how are you feeling in this moment? Are you scared? Are you worried? Are you anxious? Are you excited? Are you feeling loved? Do you feel joy? Do you feel at peace? Do you feel, what is it that you feel? Inside the Undoing community, earlier this week, I was kind of poised by God or positioned. Well, maybe that's not a good word. The Lord asked me to pray over other people. Sometimes in our bubble of hyper focusing on our, God and just our relationship, our prayers are so selfish. And it's not that praying for yourself is a bad thing, because the Lord says, come talk to me about anything. But I realized in that moment, wow, I have not spent a lot of time just praying for others. Sometimes the best thing that I can do when I'm anxious or nervous, worried, is just start thinking about other people and just pray for them. It immediately lifts your mood. And I don't know, something about having faith for somebody else in a moment when you're actually desperate for God or wanting to hear from Him. It just does something. I can't really put it into words, but it does something. So anyways, in the Undoing community earlier this week, I just asked people what's on your heart. After this video, after I'm filming this, actually, I want to set aside intentional time to just read through those and pray over those people, the people that commented. And I wish you guys would have seen it. If you're not in the community, it's a beautiful space to just join, to be covered by like-minded people that just want to know Jesus. I can't tell you how many times people have, been so open and vulnerable inside the community, talking about things they deal with and how people just come together and start praying and warring. And it's not a space of shame. It's not about what you've done or not done. It's just about knowing the Lord more and getting to experience Him sometimes through another person. And anyways, people were just flooding the comments about different prayers and things that they were experiencing. And so if you are in the community, I want you to know that after this video, I'm going to take some intentional time just to pray over you and talk to God about your situation. And there's things that I want prayer for, but the Lord has continued to kind of impress that on me this week that, Deanna, I know the things that are on your heart. Spend your time praying for somebody else to encounter me, to meet me, to see me, and watch what it does for you. And it just uplifted me. I can't really explain it, but I want to know, if you're not in the community, if there's anything I could pray for you for, or just tell me how you're feeling in this moment, and take it as a chance to be raw and honest and vulnerable and allow someone else to pray over you that's reading this comment, because you never know that the thing that you put down will actually open a door to somebody else's thought process, or somebody else can, stop being so self-consumed and just pray over you, and what the Lord will do in your life from people that prayed over you that you never met. And so I want to encourage that in this space before we move forward. We have a lot of fun things to talk about today. I want to let you guys know, I did announce in the last video that the Unraveled audiobook is going to be releasing very, very soon. Very excited about that. I read it myself. One of the hardest things I've ever done. But if you're not a reader, you're not somebody who finishes books, or books are just not your thing, this audiobook is going to be something you can listen to, whenever, relax to, fall asleep to. It's going to be great. It's going to be really great. But anyways, before we move forward, I'm sure you guys have seen the title. I might end up changing it, but we're going to talk today about the battles of systems. And there's something specifically the Lord has put in before me that I didn't know what to talk about next. And I knew as soon as He gave me this, it was this is it. And so we're going to break that down today. I want to pray before we get started, just to cover us in this space. And we're going to get into it. Yeah. All right. Dear Lord, I thank You for this place. I thank You for this space that You've cultivated, people that just want to know You. I hope that You bring peace to the person watching right now. Cover them in all areas of life. Give them peace. Help them to understand Your nearness is within their breath. I pray that You would just reveal Yourself to them in this place. Help them to realize that as they're watching this video, as we are communing together as family, that you're sitting in the midst of us, that you're excited to be here, that you have great plans for them. I pray that you would just eliminate all fear in these next few minutes. Father, let this be a place of rest, a house of rest for your people, for your child. Help them to know that you love them, that you care about them, that you are not distant, that you're here, and that you really care about the details of their life, the things that they're worried about, the things that they need answers to. You care about all of those things. And so, Father, I pray that the one that is listening right now would just take all of those things and set them to the side and let this place be a resting place for you and them to just enjoy one another, to love on each other. I thank you for what will be done here. I pray that you would take what is said here and multiply it in the way that you see fit, Father. If you want to go a different route, I outwardly claim that I will follow you. I thank you for everything you've done here and what you're doing. I thank you for the provision that is on the way in its many sorts that we're not even aware of. We love you. I thank you for the blood of Jesus and the Holy Spirit, the gift of the Holy Spirit. In your name I pray. Amen. All right. Okay, so kind of like last video, there were like a few things that I wanted to share before we got into the grit of what we'll be talking about today. But if you do have your Bible, we're going to be reading from 1 Samuel in chapter 8. There was something I shared on social the other day about, it was just a helpful tip about reading the Bible that the Lord actually gave me, that sometimes we go through it and read it almost like it's supposed to tell us what to do in life. And I've read it like that, in that way before, where I'll read and I'll take a page out of somebody else's story and say, okay, because they did this, I need to do that. And the Lord constantly checks me on that to recenter me when I come to his word. And so one of the things I've been doing is in the beginning of each book of the Bible. So I've read Ruth last week. This past week I've been in 1 Samuel. But in the beginning of the book, I'll take a sticky note. These are like transparent sticky notes. And I'll write down who is God in this book. And it helps me stay so centered in the things that I realize about him while reading the story of other people. Allow me to know what are possibilities for me, instead of limiting myself to another person's story. And that's not easy. Sometimes we'll read like a story like David and how he took out Goliath. That's what I'm reading. That's what I read this morning. And I'm like, okay, David did this and he wasn't this and it, but our stories are completely different. The only thing that is in common is our faith and the God that we love and serve. And so when I read from the lens of who is God in this story, in this passage, it allows me to see what opportunities, my Bible is just doing what it wants because of the fan. It allows me to see what opportunities present themselves through what I'm reading. It allows me to see that God is limitless. It unearths the character of God. Sometimes just by reading a chapter, you're able to pick up things that are unsaid about the nature of God, even if he's not talking, how he works out a situation seamlessly, how he connects people without people having to, put forth effort, how he provides right on time. It's just, there's so many things. And so I encourage you in that way, that if you struggle with reading the Bible, if it's kind of a challenge for you, start at the beginning of the book, each book that you read, and write down at the top, who is God? And as you notice things, write them down in the sticky note at the beginning of the book. It's really fascinating what you'll come to realize. Instead of placing this stressful emphasis on how to live right and what to do in certain situations, God will give you those things when we focus on who he is. It literally comes naturally. That's something that's helped me, so I wanted to share that. The other thing I wanted to share really quickly is declaring in your life and your relationship with God. Some of what we'll talk about today is about breaking out of systems. And I've seen a lot in my life where the Lord has put within me this spirit of like naturally being a challenger. I love to challenge myself, and I love to challenge other people. As a health coach, last year and in previous years, I love helping people see perspectives that were not known to them before. It's not always about dramatically changing your life. Sometimes it's just about a perspective shift. And I believe that God gave me that characteristic naturally because he knew that he was going to challenge me in that way. And so sometimes my mentality is like, if I'm about to be uncomfortable, we all about to be uncomfortable. And not in the sense to where like it's painful uncomfort, but it's a growth. There's growth from it. And so one of the things that God has shown me in my relationship with him is that, Deanna, you cannot fall to systems that have just been passed down to you. I didn't call you to fall in line to things that have been. And there's a difference between honoring what has come before us and just blindly following what's come before us. And I don't know if some of you guys have been raised, as a believer, or your parents were a believer in Jesus and the blood of the cross. And I don't know what your history is when it comes to God. Maybe your parents were atheists and maybe nobody, shared these things with you. Maybe there's just been an awakening within you. But I encourage you to never be afraid to question what you've heard. And it's healthy. It's a healthy questioning, not from a place of doubt. There's a difference where you question something and I just don't believe it. Or what does this actually mean? I want to grow in understanding and in wisdom. So help me understand what this truly means. Am I just following in line of systems that have been passed down? Am I just taking, Christian lingo, things that I've heard in the church and adopting it for myself? Or am I actually willing to challenge those things? Am I willing to walk against the grain, even if it doesn't seem right, even if everybody else is not doing it? And so one of those things that I've heard is that when I began my relationship with the Lord, I didn't realize that sometimes the Lord would present himself when it came to me declaring something, even if my life circumstances were not in line with what I was declaring. I'll give you an example. I've heard in the church for so long that God only speaks through certain ways, and that you have to be, you have to have fasted for a certain amount of time to hear the voice of God, or you have to be doing all the right things and then God will speak. And something in my spirit just, it didn't fully agree with that. And one of the things that I started declaring in my life is that my relationship with God will not be what I've seen from everybody else, and I'm okay with that. But the thing that I would say was that I will come into a communion with God. I will understand who he is. I will know who he is. I will understand how to hear him speak. Sometimes we hear things like in Christian culture, like lingo, like, I'll give you guys an example. How can I say? One example is, suffering in the Bible. We read that a lot, and for some reason we think that our relationship with God is going to be filled with suffering. The Lord challenged me with this specifically. He said, Deanna, you can fall in line, and what you hear is literally what you will end up living out. Or you can choose to challenge a system that has already been there and declare otherwise. Now I want to be careful when I say this, that there are places in Scripture where it says, that we do endure suffering. And the reason why we endure suffering is because our life on earth is literally backwards when it comes to heaven, or the spiritual realm of God. It feels like things that are good to us are not good, when we read the Bible, or things that are spiritually good feel physically depressing. Like there's always something that we're fighting against. And it's because our economy, so to speak, is very different than the spiritual economy. I hope that I'm making sense when I say that. But one thing I can choose to adopt is a mentality. My life is just, my relationship with God is always going to be hard. It's always going to be a struggle. I just have to follow Jesus and carry my cross. And I decided in my life is not going to be representative of a struggling, life with God. Will I have to go through obstacles? Yes. Will I have to shed layers? Yes. Is it going to be uncomfortable? Absolutely. But I'm going to have joy, and I'm going to have peace, and I'm going to sing, and I'm going to dance, and I'm going to know the joy of the Lord through laughter and through fun experiences with God. Sometimes we're always taught that relationship with the Lord is difficult and that you're going to experience difficult things. And God told me, he said, Deanna, what makes you think that your process has to be hard when it comes to walking with me? Sometimes it's making up your mind that if God tells me to do something, I don't care what it looks like, I'm going to do it. And joy comes from that alignment. Sometimes our suffering is taken on by systems that have been passed down to us because of what we've heard. This is just how life is. This is how relationship with God is. This is what you can expect. And I guarantee you there's times where you've heard that, where something in your spirit has been challenged by it. Maybe you weren't in a setting that was comfortable to, raise your hand and ask a question about it. Or maybe it felt like if you did ask, then you weren't spiritual. But the Lord constantly reminds me that there's nothing wrong with the question. It's healthy. He reminds us to be childlike. And so I say all that to say that sometimes when it comes to relationship with God, we have to understand, am I walking in this because this is something I've heard? Is it a system that has been passed down to me and I'm walking, am I just getting in line and turning into like another gray body that just follows the order of the times? Or is there something else to them? Is it possible that I can live a life on earth and be full of joy and experience things that should make me feel like I should suffer, but I'm smiling through the whole thing? And one of those things is like, another thing that I challenged was, sometimes we hear a lot of things in church culture about like just trusting God, like he wants you to be in the dark, or he does that so that you learn how to trust him, or sometimes God doesn't communicate with you until after, he kind of leaves you blind. And I told the Lord one time, I said, God, as my father, me constantly having to keep up with what you're doing in my life doesn't necessarily speak to your nature. So I started saying out of my mouth, I want to be on the same page with God so that I am with him as he's doing things in my life. There's a difference between God doing something in your life and then several months later you're like, oh, that's what was happening? Or being in such communion with God that he is telling you, communicating to you what is happening, what is coming. I don't believe that, and this is just personal belief, but I've seen the Lord manifest himself in my life in this way when I've taken on a system and just said, well, God just wants me to trust him. He doesn't want me to know what's coming. I just need there. Yes, he's building trust, but there are also things where he will communicate openly to you. I've had the Lord literally warn me of something that is about to take place so that when I go in this setting, I'm not responding or reacting because I'm unaware. As his child, he wants me to be informed, and he wants me to have knowledge, and he wants me to understand his voice, not to go through life hoping that was God. Was that him? Did I hear him correctly? The Lord wants you to know him. That is the purpose of relationship. And so sometimes I say all this to say I'm passionate about it because I've had to go through experiences, and this is not to shame the church. It is a beautiful place, and the church is a beautiful people. But sometimes when we're in the culture, we have to be willing to question certain things. Is this something that is just passed down because it is lingo, or is there truth behind this? And I chose to believe in my life that I will know the voice of God, even if I couldn't hear him, even if everything felt confusing. I might not know it now, but I will. And I'm going to declare that he will talk with me, and he will show me things, and he will reveal himself to me. And I'm not going to be this child that's always trying to keep up with what he's doing in my life, that he will warn me of things, that he will show me things, that he will prepare me before I go. Sometimes God will prepare you as you go, and sometimes what I've seen in my life is it took me believing that he would show me something, and it's like he showed me. I can't really like explain that, and that's not to say I'm the one that made that happen, but I don't think it's ironic that the only thing we had to do when it comes to accepting the Lord in our life was belief. There wasn't anything we had to like outwardly do or outwardly express. It was faith, believing in the fact that he was the Son of God and that his blood covered us. And under that, we experience grace and mercy. And the new covenant is now the place of communion with the Lord. Sometimes I wonder if it's just that we believe that he will do a thing for us to see it manifest. I've read people's comments and things like, how do you hear the voice of God? How did you do all these things? And I'm like, I don't know. I just said that he would talk to me. And I'm not saying that that's what made it happen. There was a lot of releasing things and letting go of things. And did I hear him right? And being confused. There was a lot of those things. It wasn't just like he said something to me and I knew it was that. There's still things that I know the Lord will communicate to me. And I'll say, God, I need another confirmation on that. I believe that was you. My history says that that was you, but before I go, I want to know that this was you and it wasn't just something I conjured up. There's nothing wrong with that. But I say all of that to say, I encourage you to start declaring the things that you want to see in relationship with God instead of just falling blindly into a system of things that you've heard about him. No, I will know God. I will understand the way that he moves. Our ways and our thoughts might not be his, but as his child, I come from him. And so I can start moving in a place and he will open doors to me and shed light on things to where I walk in life as a child of God in the knowing of who he is, not this distant stranger or a beggar who doesn't understand his ways and is always trying to keep up with the times and doesn't know his voice. He says, my sheep hear my voice and they know that it is me. So if he says that, that has to mean that there is some place and time in our life where we come into communion where there is not a questioning of his voice, or there's a command that he gives and it's seamless to move into it instead of wondering, was that really him, or did I hear him right, or all these things that sometimes society will tell you is how relationship with him looks like. So anyways, part of that is what we'll talk about today, but that's what I really wanted to encourage you with, is that you can say something out of your mouth that isn't necessarily active in your life right now. Maybe you can't hear the voice of God, or haven't heard him clearly, but you desire that. And maybe people are telling you that you have to do things a certain way in order to hear it, or you can't hear him until you do these things, or the Lord can move in any way that he wants. Sometimes he's just waiting on you to believe that he will. Believe that he will speak to you. Believe that his voice is clear. Believe that you are a child of God. And because of that position, we talked about that in the last video, because of that position, I can come boldly before him and say, Father, I want to know you. I don't want to be this stranger that's not understanding what you're doing in my life. I want to be with the times. I want to see you do something and say, he just told me that last week. It's not a surprise. You're not, oh my gosh, this is what's happening. You're not startled. You're not behind. You're not trying to catch up. You're so in sync with who he is. And I believe that that's possible. But it took me questioning a system to come into realization that I'm a child of God. And there's a confidence that's there. And because of my position in him, my life with him is not going to be separate and distant and unknowing. No, even if I don't feel that today, there's some days I feel so close to God, and then there's other days where I'm like, where are you at? And that's not that I don't know he's near. It's just sometimes things come up and it causes us to question. But even in that space, I remind myself, I'm his daughter, and he communes with me and he talks with me and he's clear. The Lord will speak clearly to me. Even if you don't feel that, say it out of your mouth and know that he will meet you there. I just believe that for you, that your life and your relationship with him is going to be filled with joy, and that the systems that you've heard are not something you have to fall in line to, that you can question them and you can say, God, is this what is real for my life? Does this match who you are and what I'm reading in the Bible? Or is this just something that has been passed down from generation to generation? I don't want to fall in line to what I've heard. I want to fall in line to what is true. And I believe that he'll meet you there. I've seen him do it in my life, and that's a testimony. But anyways, I have 0 notes today, you guys. I know what the Lord wanted me to talk to you guys about, and it all stems from 1 Samuel. The Israelites, their relationship with the Lord is so beautiful. And for anybody that experiences guilt or shame about, we'll put the word backsliding, falling from God, coming back to him, messing up, coming back to him, forgiveness, all of those things. The Israelites were the Lord's chosen people, and they're a prime example of the mercy and patience that God has. They're also a prime example of the seriousness of God. He means what he says, and he'll carry out what he said he will do. But if anything, when I read about the Israelites and how they were quick to just forget, what he said, or sometimes God's given me things in my life as an anchor, and it'll seem like the very next day something happens, and it's like he didn't even say that, like I forgot. But he's so patient to remind me of what he said about my life. And there's something here that I noticed in 1 Samuel about the Israelites. And we're going to read that first, and then I'll break down to you guys. Essentially, what we'll be talking about today is, it is about the systems in your life, but it's also about who is king over your life. And we're going to talk about the anxiety, fear that comes with those statements, and I think it's going to be great. Okay, so if you don't have your Bible, don't stress. I'm going to read chapter 8. It's about 22 verses, and then we're gonna get into the grit, into the thick of it. All right. To give you a backstory, the Israelites are in a place where, if you read chapters before this, you'll see that it says a lot about the people kind of ruled based on, I think we talked about this in the last video. They did things what was right in their own eyes. There was no centralized ruler in the physical sense of the word, over the Israelites. God was their king. They wanted more than that, but we're going to read that, okay? So it says, now it came to pass when Samuel was old that he made his sons judges over Israel. In this time, there were a lot of judges from the different tribes ruling over Israel, but there wasn't one centralized like king. It says the name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second, I don't know why I do this, Abijah. They were judges in Beersheba, and his sons did not walk in his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain, took bribes, and perverted justice. So they were living in a time where leadership even was not under like one centralized rule, one voice, where they had Moses and then Joshua and things like that. It seemed like there was kind of like leaders everywhere, kind of dispersed. Verse 4, it says, then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, look, you are old and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge us. We'll come back to that. So Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, heed the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. According to all the works which they had done since the day I brought them up out of Egypt, even to this day, with which they have forsaken me and served other gods. They have placed other things in between us. So they are doing also to you, meaning to Samuel. Now therefore heed their voice, listen to what they're saying. However, you should solemnly forewarn them and show them the behavior of the king who will reign over them. So he's communicating to Samuel. Samuel was like the mediator, so to speak, between the Israelites and God. The Lord would speak to Samuel. He would disseminate what was said. And so the people come to him and say, hey, we want a king like the other nations. We want to be like the other nations. And the Lord says, listen to what they're saying. Samuel goes before God and he communicates what the people have said. And it actually made Samuel's heart sad because I don't even think the people realized what they were saying. And so the Lord says, listen to what they're saying, but warn them about what it is that they're asking for. So Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people. Samuel goes back to them and communicates what God has said. The people who asked him for a king, and he said, this will be the behavior of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for his own chariots and to be his horsemen, and some will run before his chariots. They will be servants. This rule will cause you to be a servant. He will appoint captains over thousands and captains over his 50s, will set some to plow his ground and reap his harvest. He will place you under oppression and under work, different kind of work. And some will make his weapons of war and equipments for his chariots. You will serve him. Listen to this. He will take your daughters to be perfumers, cookers, and bakers, and he will take the best of your fields, your vineyards, and your olive groves, and give them to his servants. He will take from you. He will take a tenth of your grain and your vintage and give it to his officers and servants. And he will take your male servants and your female servants and your finest young men and your donkeys and put them to his work. And he will take a tenth of your sheep, and you will be his servants. And you will cry out in that day because your king, whom you have chosen for yourself, and the Lord will not hear you in that day. This seems kind of harsh. When I read that, I was like, dang. Verse 19, it says, nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel. So Samuel has told all of the people what God has said that this king will do. They refused to obey, and they said, no, but we will have a king over us, that we also may be like that we also may be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles. And Samuel heard all the words of the people, and he repeated them in the hearing of the Lord. So the Lord said to Samuel, heed their voice and make them a king. And Samuel said to the men of the city, every man go to his city. So there's a transition that kind of happens between the next chapter where Saul is chosen, and I think Saul has like a bad rep. Our conversation today is not about Saul. The Lord, this past week, has shown me that he brought me to like a quiet and a still place in my life. And many times we see that as like a setback. We don't see that as progressive. We feel like it's the wilderness. We say all these things, terminology, not fully understanding what's happening. And I've noticed that many times where God will call me to a state of rest is not just so that I can rest, but so that I can also reflect. because what is coming needs my reflection of what has already happened. Wow, I need to write that down somewhere. And so we see here in this time where it seems like a period where there's not one centralized ruler. It could have been for a reason, where we read from the text that Samuel's heart becomes sad because what the people are saying is because they fail to realize that they actually already have a king, that the Lord is ruler over their lives, but they want someone in between. They want somebody over them to fight their battles, go before them, provide these things. The Lord says to Samuel, listen to what they're saying. I find this really interesting that God says to listen to them. Sometimes in our life, we don't recognize what it is that we are actually asking from God, non-verbally, but through our actions. And there comes a point in time when he will heed, when he will listen to what it is that we're saying. Children of Israel are crying out for a king, failing to realize that they have a king. And God says to Samuel, listen to what they're saying and make them a king. This is so powerful. The Lord showed me in my life, he said, Deanna, we cannot move forward until you reflect on your current situation, your current surrounding. And what I was saying earlier about sometimes how the Lord will call us to a place of rest, it is to be refed. He makes us to lie down in green pastures so that we can be refed by him. Anytime he calls me to a state of rest, it is always to prepare me for what is to come. He sees that I might need to be a little more sure in my identity. He sees that I might need more of his love for where it is that I'm going. Maybe he's going to deposit something within me. It's not always about something new. Sometimes that reflection, the rest is about reinstilling who he is, and the reflection is about reevaluating what he's already done. And so, he'll call us to like a period of a pause in our life where it seems like a lot of things around us are still. And it really is truly to analyze what our relationship with him is like. It's not for us to stress. I want to be very clear about that. Sometimes the Lord will call us to a pause and we think, I'm doing something wrong. What am I doing? What am I not doing right? It's all about what we're not doing right instead of, God, bring to light an area that needs my attention. If there's something that I've caused to come in between us, reveal that to me, because sometimes we'll walk in a certain way completely unknowing that we have adopted idols into our life. And idols, I say that meaning just things that we begin to worship, not realizing we're worshiping those things over our relationship with God. And so the Israelites had a history of turning to other things outside of understanding who was Lord over their life. And I want to talk about that really quickly. When some of us have fear about our relationship with God, where he says things like, I want to rule over your life. I want to be Lord. I want to, be the God and King over your life. And it sounds, sometimes if you don't break out of those systems, it can sound very much like a dictatorship. God just wants to tell me what to do, when to do it, how to do it. It's not that. It's that the Lord understands in the wisdom of God that when we come into submission of his authority, and everything that flows through that is goodness. He doesn't say, just serve me for the sake of serving me. Just remove that relationship because it's coming in the way of you and I, just because he wants you to do something for him. It's because he sees in his all-knowingness that there is something in the way that causes you not to be in a place of fullness with him. So really, anytime the Lord asks us to do something, to release something, where he sees that he sees more than we're saying, it's not just this like dictatorship. Where we come into communion with him is that we understand anytime he gives us instruction or reveals something in our life, it's never from a place of guilt or shame. Rather, he's saying, he's saying, my child is being withheld goodness right now. Something is in the way of that. And so I'm going to remove this from their life. I'm going to draw them out. I'm going to separate them so that there's nothing in between them and I. And when there's nothing in between them and I, there is complete goodness and fullness, realization of our identity, a truth of the understanding of who God is in our life and our position in him. And so when the people come to Samuel and say, we want a king, in their actions, outwardly, vocally, they're saying, we want someone to rule over us, failing to realize that they have the best ruler already over them. It doesn't always feel like that, because the Lord has called them into the wilderness, because they have to be, because they are a chosen people, they can't do things like everyone else does things. There's many times, if you read through Deuteronomy and going in, even into Judges, before the Lord allows the Israelites to come into the promised land, that he says things like, do not, he deposits this mentality within them, like, do not go into these places, this land that I'm about to give you, and become friends with the people who completely deny me. We'll talk about this later. And I want you to understand that there's a difference between the Lord going and, sending you into a territory where he wants you to be the standard. And there's a difference between going into those territories when people don't know him, and being the light. Sometimes God would tell the people this vicious mentality, like, go into this place and take over. And what the Israelites would do was they would completely dismantle the people that lived there, wiping them out, killing them. It was everybody. It wasn't just, the men, it was women, children, everything. But the Lord saw something in the wisdom of God, that he didn't want them to go in a place and be joined together with something that would separate his children from him. So when the Israelites come to Samuel and they say, we want a king, they were vocally saying, we want somebody to rule over us. God in his wisdom was looking down, and even Samuel's heart was like, wow, they don't see it, that they have everything that they already need, and they feel like they need something else. I want to point something out to you guys in verse 18. No, not verse 18. Let's go to verse 19. Nevertheless, the people refused. This is after Samuel has told them, this is what's going to happen to you if you allow this king, if you come into communion with this thing in your life that will cause you to be a servant when that's not what I've called you to. This is what's going to happen. They say, no, but we will have a king over us, that we may also be like all the nations. And I kept reading over that and over that and over that again. There was something that God was doing in my life, and he because he's all knowing and all powerful, I had to trust what he was telling me to do. My fear was telling me to fall into a system in the way that things have already been done. And he said to me, Deanna, he said, you would rather fall into a system and have a king over you that will allow you to walk the earth as a servant than allow me to just rule over you as your father, and the communion that comes from that allow you to be set apart, to be the standard. If you read through the books even before 1 Samuel, you can see this thread where the Lord has said, my son, my chosen people, he says that in Exodus, where he's constantly bringing them to a place where they are set apart. They are the standard, where people would look to them and say, reflect on Israel and connect them with God. You read many times in Scripture and it says, the God of Israel. How powerful would it be for you in your life, for people to recognize that the Lord is so connected with you that they say, the God of Deanna, the God of Sarah, the God of Elizabeth. He wanted to raise them to that standard, and they wanted to be like everyone else. They say, no, but we will have a king to rule over us. We want to be like the other nations. In their eyes, it seemed like the grass was greener. Maybe the other nations had what seemed like more order. Maybe, I don't know. What they failed to see was the oppressive rule that came with falling into a system, needing, somebody else to be that middleman in between God and them. And the Lord, when he called me to a state of rest, he said, Deanna, I need you to reflect over your life. Some of what you're dealing with right now, and this is what we'll talk about today, some of what you're dealing with right now is because through your actions, you have communicated and communicated and communicated that I am not enough as the ruler over your life. And things have come in that you have allowed to be, that you've allowed. Okay, let me give you guys a picture. Say God is here, right? We're here, not in atmosphere or geographic location. Just kind of walk with me here. When we think that this is not enough, our communion with him, we start to add in other things. Sometimes that will come through social media. Sometimes we think we need a mentor. Sometimes we think we need a pastor to understand. Sometimes we'll look at other people's lives and see what they've done. So we think we need what they've done in order to amass what God is calling us to. And that's just not the truth. Here, the Lord is specifically telling them, I want you to be a chosen people. I want you to be set apart. And you think that you need A, B, and C in order to do that. But you actually fail to realize that you already have the thing. When I say the thing, I mean God as the ruler of our life. It wasn't enough for them. And so I find it so interesting that the Lord comes to a place where he's like, I'm not going to keep telling you and telling you and telling you that I am all you need. Sometimes it could be a relationship where he's saying, you don't need that. You just need me. Sometimes it could be that God is calling you away from a job and you're like, how could I possibly provide for myself without that? And he's saying, you don't need that. You already have everything you need. For whatever reason, when it comes to God, we think because he isn't always tangible, because I can't look and see him physically, I look and see him atmospherically, if I could say that's a word, and I see him in all things. But sometimes we don't see him like a friend we can hug, that it feels like he's not enough. And we will reach for things that, because we've been systematized or domesticated, that speak to inadequacy maybe in our life. We think that we need something in order to be something. And God says, you don't need that. It could even be down to, I know before in my life, I used to struggle with edibles. And probably like 3 years ago, I got to a point where I was like constantly taking them. And what I was looking for was peace. It allowed me to relax. I felt like when I took them, I could just breathe. Like I didn't need, I just felt like I could breathe. I could take a step away from the trauma that had happened in my life. Situations didn't seem as terrible or as daunting as they were. When I consumed the edible, it just allowed me to be in a constant state of like, I don't know. It was like I was existing above the atmosphere of earth. I would laugh more. I was more at rest. I felt like I was more playful. I was very goofy and silly. Sometimes my personality can tend to be like quiet and stoic. I'm very observant. I like to consume like what's happening in the room, who's speaking the most, why do they. I love watching human behavior. But when I would take the edible, it was like something in me just relaxed. And the Lord showed me that you think that you need that in order to obtain this, when I am actually the only thing that you need. I couldn't see that in the time when he was asking me to release it. How could the Lord be my peace when in fact my relationship that was growing with the Lord was nothing but stress, a lot of confusion. I didn't understand things. It seemed like chaos. And I'm like, how can he be my peace when literally since I've chosen to walk with him, my life has been so stressful and confusing? And it didn't seem like he was the answer, but all along he was telling me that you have everything you need under my rule. You don't need to add anything else in. You don't need to be seen by this person to make it in life. That was another thing I struggled with even, talking on social media. You get to a place where for some reason we think we need to be discovered. And the Lord has said to me, Deanna, you are already seen by the most important eyes in the universe. You don't need to be seen or discovered by anybody else. If I've told you to do something, then in that command, you have everything you need to walk that out. It doesn't mean that I do that perfectly. Literally just yesterday, I had a whole meltdown, and my husband had to, remind me of who I was in the Lord. And we need relationships like that, because there's going to be times where our walk is not always linear with God, that we'll have high moments, but then we'll have moments where it's like we almost forget what he has said. And that's why he will call us to a place of a pause and reflect. The Lord had just told me to do something, and he knew that I would need that pause, because what would come with that would speak to the fact in my mind that I needed A, B, and C in order to do what he had asked me to do. When he said it, you didn't need any of that, because you already have the word. If I've told you that you can do it, if I've said that you are this, then you don't need the things that you think that you need in order to be something. And so I find it just very interesting that the Lord will come to, we see this of his nature, that he came to a certain point where he tells Samuel, listen to what they've said and give them what it is that they desire. In my reflection over this past week, the Lord has kind of brought to the table, Deanna, is there anything in your life that you've asked in your actions? We might not vocally, and I want you to kind of use your imagination in this space. There are things in my life, maybe in your life, where you have said with your actions, maybe not with your words, that you desired this thing to rule over you. And anytime we want or desire something to rule over us, it comes in the form of that we're worshiping that which is an idol, but it also causes us to be a servant to that thing. The Lord says that, to Samuel in the scripture, this king that they desire, that they think that they need so that they can be like everyone else, is going to cause them to become a servant when I've said that they are my child. And I don't know, why this was so heavy on my spirit, but I think when I was reading this, something in me was like, wow, the Lord saw that this king wasn't going to be good for them, but in their ignorance, because they kept demanding for a thing, their words kept, speaking to the fact that they thought they needed something outside of him. It's almost like he relinquished that and said, go ahead. And it's interesting to me that the Lord had warned them before. He actually gave them another opportunity when Samuel comes back and he says, look, you guys want a king, but this is what he will do. They didn't want to hear it. Sometimes in our actions, it's like we don't even want to hear it. We've been given examples of what things that have ruined people's lives have done. I'll give you guys an example. I have examples in my life of how alcoholism has ruined people. It's not that having a glass of wine is a bad thing. It's not that alcohol in its state is a bad thing. And I'm not going to get too deep into this because this place is not about my opinion. Always ask the Lord what is for you and what's not for you before you just adopt somebody else's perspective. But I saw what it did to the people in my family, aunts, uncles. I just saw what had happened. And so previously in my life, I did used to drink a lot. And there was a point in time where I was going through a really rough period of my life. I felt very alone. I had everything that the world would say would give you happiness, but internally I was literally emptying a bottle of wine every 2 days. And I remember going to Target, always having to restock it. But then there was one night, and I encourage you with this because it wasn't even like I had been fully developed in hearing the voice of God or anything. There was just one night and I sat there and the Lord brought to memory, because I thought that I needed something in order to give me peace, in order to help me relax, in order to help take my mind off things. He kept it wasn't even like I was in deep relationship with him, but there was something within me that would say, you don't need that. And I would still reach for it because I kept reaching for it. I believe the Lord got to a place in my life where he was like, Deanna, if that's what you think that you need, I will take a step back and allow that to govern your life. But you have prime examples of what happens when this is the king over someone's life. And that's not just with, weed or alcohol. I give you guys examples like that. Those are actually shallow examples. Sometimes it can be about a connection that you have towards something, the fear of letting something go. The Lord has shown me in my life, anytime I'm afraid to release something, that is a direct indication that that thing has rulership over my life. And because of that rulership, I am a servant to it. We don't see it that way when God says, let go of this or let this thing go. Prior in my life, the Lord had asked me to release my entire business. And my husband and I, we weren't married at the time. We were actually living together and dating, or we were engaged. But the Lord had called us to come into a state of communion under covenant through marriage with him. We didn't understand all the details of that, but shortly after we got married. But in this particular time, he said, I want you to release that thing. And in our minds, releasing that meant releasing all of my finances. At the time, I was also, my ego, my identity, all of my validation was tied in that. It was all run through social media. And because it financed everything I did, it allowed me to provide for my son and live comfortably because I couldn't release it at the time. It took me a whole year to actually let it go. The Lord showed me after the fact that when you come into a place where you desire a thing, or you cannot move forward because you think you need something, or you want to be like everybody else because it looks like their grass is greener, that thing in your life has rulership over your life. And because of that, you are a servant to that thing. And even when he said that to me, it wasn't, remember this always, the Lord never communicates out of like pointing a finger. It's always like, my child, this is what's happening. I want to include you on what really is going on in your life. And just this week, the Lord placed me in what felt like a pause. And it was like, reflect over your life, over what you think that you need. Is there anything in your life that if I asked you to release it, it would be difficult for you to let go of? Is it an identity, a relationship, a thought process, down to the way that you move throughout the day? Some of us we're so, connected to the way in which we move throughout the world. We've adopted perception, and that perception has allowed us to take on an identity. And when the Lord will call us to move differently, it's like we can't not do that because that's who we are. This persona, dictates who I am. And because even of a thought process, a mental construct and or a system that the Lord will ask you to release, when it's difficult to release that, there's something in that means that mentality, that identity, that persona, that thought process, that pattern has a rule over your life. And I find it, when the Lord said to Samuel, give them a king, I felt like that was scary. When I read that, I was like, dang, he really got to a place where he took a step back. And it's not that he wasn't still fully involved with the children of Israel, because shortly after Saul, the Lord says, I will allow someone after my own heart. He still gives them, what they wanted, but he provides someone who would rule with purity. They wanted what they wanted it, and they wanted it now. I wonder maybe if they would have put that request before the Lord and been patient to wait, that Saul wouldn't have been a king. Maybe it just would have been David. I don't know. Maybe if they were comfortable with the Lord just being their ruler, it would have just been, God over the Israelites as a whole, and there wouldn't have been a need for King David. I don't know. But the Lord really just highlighted this in my spirit, and he said, Deanna, you need to analyze your life for the next place that I'm taking you. There can be no compromise in the camp. And I say that because that's something we'll have to talk on at another time, but the Lord showed me that we could not move forward in our relationship, in what he wanted to show me and what he wanted to reveal to me. And it wasn't that he was withholding those things from me, but it was because I was allowing something else to rule over me that I still had an attachment to. And in that way, I was still a servant to that thing. We don't even realize sometimes how we're going through life being a servant to something. And when the Lord called me to that pause, he said, Deanna, this reflection is here also to show you that you could be walking in a space in life where you've asked, because your actions have communicated that you've wanted this thing so bad, you need it to rule over you so much that I've taken a step back. And what you're living under right now is the consequence of needing that thing and not understanding that you have everything you need in me. So it's like twofold, more so like going forward. Is there anything that is ruling over me right now that causes me to be a servant in my life? But also, am I in a place right now where my actions have communicated consistently to God that this thing is I desire and I need it over my life? And God has said, okay, now I'm living under what the Israelites would be living under. God gives them a warning. He says, if this is your king, this is what he will do to you. He will turn you into a servant. Sometimes we feel like we're living under oppression, and it's not that God isn't good, and it's not that he's not involved in our life, but maybe somewhere along the way, we've communicated that we need a rule. We need to be like when he's asked us to be set apart. We think that we need something in our life, and we come to a place where God just says, okay, you want the king? I've told you, I've shown you what will happen if this thing becomes the God in your life. I've given you examples. There's people around you. Now that you desire that, you must also live with what comes underneath that. And even in the goodness of God, there's so many times where the Israelites experience that, and then they cry out to God, and God raises up somebody else. And he's merciful in that. So never think that just because you have, your actions or your life has communicated that you've desired someone else to rule, even unknowing, that you've done this, that you can't always say, okay, God, I don't know what life looks like without this thing ruling in my life, but I'm willing to walk with you to where I'm no longer a servant to it. You say that I am an heir, but maybe my life is reflective that I'm a servant because of what I've allowed to be my king, who I've allowed to rule over me, what idea, philosophy, persona, or identity I've allowed to rule over me. And I don't know, I find it so interesting that God, he does it in a way where he gives them opportunity. He warns them, he forewarns them of what will happen. But he also he's not a God that says you will do this. To a certain degree, they asked for it and they kept asking and they kept asking, and he said, okay. There's a fear of God, and we'll have to talk about this at a different time. There's a difference between being afraid of God and fearing his hand not being in your life. And I say that because I've experienced being afraid of God, being literally like terrified of him and serving him from a place of obligation and servanthood, or fearing what my life would be like without even my knowledge of him, of his presence, and his hand actively in my life. Sometimes as an observer, I like to observe people, but I'll watch people move and flow in life, and even reflect on my life 5 years ago, and I'm like, how in the world, outside of the grace of God, did I move about in life without acknowledging him as my everything? But I can see how empty it was and how much pain I experienced and how I gravitated towards things that I felt gave me security and validation, because truthfully, subconsciously, I was really in search for the connection with my Father. He was there all along, but my knowledge of him, my knowing of him was it was absent. And I wouldn't say a fear, but there was a sadness I felt, even for my past self or for people who just live, based on their own means. It's scary to live in this world and not have God as your center, as your peace, as your rock, and when he says, when he takes a step back and says to Samuel, give them their king, there's a fear that I felt when I read that. Lord, I don't want anything in my life to rule over me that causes me to be a servant. And so that fear is what will sometimes obedience to God and taking a step towards him is not always just because you want to be an obedient child. Sometimes it's actually the fear of God absent from your life that will cause you to say, okay, if this relationship isn't for me, I let it go. I don't care if I've been with him for 10 years. I don't care. You just release a thing, because I would rather have God in my life and him be the ruler, so that my life is evident of how can I say, that I'm a child of God, than a servant to something else. And my challenge to you and my challenge to myself today is, if there's any area in your life where you feel a slave to something, you feel oppressed by something, you feel like a servant to something, it could even be in mind in your relationship towards God. Maybe you're working in relationship with him, in line with the system that has been passed down to you. Sometimes, like I said earlier in the video, it takes us questioning that system or releasing that domesticated way of thinking that no longer allows us to respond to God from a servanthood, instead of our true position in him, going before him as a child of God. Sometimes it can be anything that causes us really just to be a servant. And this kind of message, it does deal with a war in our mind, because a servant will go through life very differently than a child of God will. Even a servant of God who doesn't understand that he's a child of God will respond to situations differently. They will walk in the earth and move about differently. Their confidence approaching God is different. And so at every turn, the Lord is always, and I always say this, that he's bringing us into oneness and fullness with him. Everything that he does is for our good. Even if it feels backwards, even if on earth we've heard a certain way and something is disconnected within us, everything that he does in our life, even if it feels painful, is for our good. And so I can't help but look at this, passage in Samuel and think that if God didn't give them a king and he knows best, then he understood the place that they were in was good for them. It might have been painful. You read about the wilderness and the Israelites, like their life didn't seem fun. I'm sure they probably, as they were traveling, went past certain kingdoms and it looked like people, I can imagine like being in the wilderness for so long and then passing like established regions, because we read the Bible as if the Israelites were the only people on earth. Like there was a whole earth with systems and functions and like rulers, and people were living and thriving and doing whatever they were doing. Maybe they weren't thriving, but they were living. But I imagine them being in a wilderness place and having to walk past established, cities or towns and thinking, wow, I wish I had what they had. Or they see, like, what would it be like to have a home? They were a people who were constantly moving. Maybe they felt like they didn't have a home. They weren't like an established people. Everything that they thought they needed was the thing that would actually keep them from not being set apart. Thinking that they needed a king to rule over them when they had literally the voice of God, that he traveled with them, by day and by night, that there was evidence of him in their life. That just didn't seem like enough. So they needed something outside of him. And the Lord just got to a place where he said, give them the thing that they desire. And so I believe that God placed this before me for me to reflect. This pause in my life has been all about analyzing who is truly king in my life. Is there any place in my life where I feel oppressed or feel like a servant or feel like I'm under a rule of something? It could be, it's not always that it's out external. It could be an oppressive rule in the way that we think. It could be an oppressive system in the way that we move and flow throughout life. It could be, a societal pressure that tells you need these things in order to be that. And God's saying, you actually just need me. Like, it has to be enough in order for us to move forward. It has to be enough. Only I have to be enough in your life in order for us to go deeper in relationships. Sometimes it could be, and I've seen a lot of people commenting like who is your mentor and what church do you go to and all these kinds of questions. And I've had my own struggles and issues with being involved in church, and the church as a people is a beautiful place, and it is the bride of Christ. So I always want to be very careful about how I talk about church, but there was a period of my life where I was very ugly towards church because I felt like it didn't provide the things that I felt it should provide. I wanted a deeper relationship with God. I wanted mentors and spiritual guidance, and I wanted all these things, but every church that I went to was lacking in the thing that I desired. All the while, God was saying, this place, this church, this place of communion and community still cannot be the God in your life. It cannot rule over you. I have to have the final say in your life. And so sometimes he would allow me to go into atmospheres that didn't speak to what I desired, so that I would realize that I already had the thing that I needed. I wanted deeper connection. I remember my husband and I going to a church, and the church was beautiful and lovely. The people were lovely, but the thing that was missing was like everything seemed like so timely. Do this, do that. It was very uniform and structured, and the Spirit of God was missing. Like the presence of him, that deeper communion with him was missing. And so I thought that was in another church. So we went to a different church, kind of lacked the same thing. Failing to realize, like both my husband and I, we didn't realize that what we were desiring wasn't going to be found in an established system. Wow. But it was in him. Everything that we were looking for was in him, and that sometimes didn't feel like enough. I wanted community and friends and people to go deeper with, but God was saying, like, in this place where you're at, even above the authority of your pastor, my voice has to have the final say. If you allow the voice of another, that's why I say in this place, do not idolize this place, this atmosphere, because you do not need me in order to go deeper with God. You don't need the understanding that I have everything that he's given to me. If you view my relationship with him as like, oh my gosh, I want that, start declaring, I will have this and I will have that, and watch the Lord give it to you, because he wants to be king over your life. If you look at what has been established here, or you idolize somebody else's relationship with him, they will always have a rule over how far you can go with God. There will always be a limit and a ceiling. And so through a lot of frustrating experiences, my husband and I had to realize that our communion with the Lord first had to be found in our quiet time with him. And then community with the church would establish that and nurture it and develop it and help us to become more like Jesus, because the church community is imperfect. But it wasn't the thing that we needed to idolize, our go-to when we didn't have an answer or we didn't know what to do, we run to the church. No, the church is an addition. The people of God are an addition, but I have to have the final say in your life. And again, it's not because of a dictatorship. It is because God understands the goodness that comes with him being the only thing in our life, that there's nothing else. We experience goodness as his child when he is the only ruler in our life. And how good of a God is he, that it seems like it's restrictive, and it seems like you can't always do things everyone else is doing. It seems like maybe someone's grass is greener. And if we keep with that mentality that something outside of us is better than what we have living within us, that thing will always be the ruler in our life. It will always carry some form of I want to call it mastership, but I don't think that's the word. It will just always carry some form of rulership in our life. And so as you keep on reading, everything that God warns them that would happen, happens. He says, I'm going to give you this, but when I give it to you, this is what will happen. And what he says, actually happens. Saul ends up kind of taking everything from them and making their children servants. And they live under this somewhat oppressive rule under him. But it was because of what they asked for. And everything we talk about here, sometimes the Lord will open my eyes to something and it causes me to be a little anxious, because I'm like, okay, now what do I do with this? Sometimes we feel like we need to go fix everything immediately, when really what's only required is reflection and belief. Okay, this thing I can see, or maybe we can't see. God, sometimes it's about the Lord revealing a thing to us and saying, God, okay, now what do I do with this? We always take instruction, command, or light given from the Lord in the sense that he opens our eyes to something as that we need to go run and fix it right now, when he says, actually, in this place, I'm starting a conversation with you. There's been many times where I've heard from the Lord and then I've ran to fix whatever I think needs fixing. He said, Deanna, no, I was actually starting a conversation with you. The next best thing you can do, even if you don't know what it is that I'm talking about, is ask me the next question. Lord, what do I do with this? God, what in my life is governing? Is there anything in my life that I've allowed to have a rule over me that has actually caused me to walk about the earth as a servant? And believe that he will be faithful to show you that. Sometimes it's not about, we get very caught up in thinking we need to do A, B, and C in order for God to move in our life. And sometimes it really just requires a pause and a reflection. Sometimes he will push you to that pause and it feels uncomfortable because you're being drawn away from friends. You don't really connect with everybody like you used to anymore. Certain environments that used to feed you don't feed you the same anymore. You just feel very ostracized from your routine of life. That is a direct call for you. Not that something's wrong in your life, but that the Lord would draw you out and say, I need you to reflect on this. Something is coming. I'm about to take you deeper. You and I are going to go to another level. But before we do that, I need you to analyze who has rulership over your life right now. And I feel like even when I say that, it's so cool because God will bring you into that space to talk with you about it. He's not bringing you to a place to condemn you or to make you feel bad for walking in a place of unknowing. He's like, hey, I want to talk with you. We're going to go deeper. Maybe it's that the Israelites were at a turning point in their relationship with God where he communicates to them, I'm about to set you apart as an established nation. They were going to be the standard, so that when people looked to them, if you read, just about the Israelites, there were so many times where God wanted them to be set apart. He wanted them to be the standard. I believe in scripture where God says you will be the lender and not the borrower, that falls in line with him being the ultimate rule over our life, that the world would look at us and say, what is it that they're doing? that the Lord would add to us. Sometimes it's not about him blessing you financially just so that you can have things, but what catches the attention of the world that says they have something that I don't, but you're able to deliver something that's within you. He always raises us up to a place to be the standard, to be set apart. As he's raising us up, that raising up feels very uncomfortable. It feels like you can't do things everybody else does. It feels like you can't walk and talk like everybody. It feels restrictive. There's been things in my life that God has told me I cannot do. And I felt like I have a rebellious spirit about me sometimes, where if somebody tells me I can't do something, I'm like, it either frustrates me that you're telling me I can't, or I'm going to do it just because I can. Like, I don't have to listen to you, but under the submission of God, I've had to trust what he's telling me I can't do and not see it as something that is restrictive, but that it's actually going to be in my favor. If he's saying, don't do that, don't be like this, release this persona, release this identity. You can't think like that. Yes, you've been guarded and had to protect yourself for so long because of the pain that you've gone through, but I'm asking you to release that. It's not because he just doesn't want you to do it and because he wants you to listen. It's because it's actually in your favor that you follow what it is that he's saying. And I don't know, I feel like God is just causing his kids, his children, to pause and reflect, so that he can take us higher, that he can go deeper. Sometimes that elevation doesn't always appear in the form of external praise. Sometimes your situation literally will not change, but in spirit, there's something that he's cultivating that's deeper. In mind, you're dreaming bigger than you ever have before. In faith, you're believing for more than you ever believed for. Sometimes it's not about your environment changing. And it could have been that for the Israelites. Maybe it wasn't about their environment changing. Maybe they were still in tents doing the same old, not really having an established place, but it was that the Lord didn't even want them to be established in that wilderness way of thinking, that he would raise them up to be a people that were his chosen people, that people on earth will look to them and say, it would be like the Lord causing you to become a person where everything that you did, everything that you said, the way that you moved, everything that you touched, it would be completely undeniable that he is the God over your life. And because of that, you experience the blessing and favor just by being his chosen person, his chosen people, the holy nation that he's raising up. We always just think that it doesn't feel fun along the way, but he has nothing but goodness coming from us staying in a place where he is the only rule over our life. And I don't say all of this to say, like, don't be in church and just spend time with God on your own. There have been times where I've had to take a step away from community type atmospheres because I would be swayed by what was done. And the Lord would say, you're falling into a system, even if it was among his children. And he said, I don't want you to fall into that way of thinking because it's not true about my actual character. You will not be a person that falls into this systematized way of thinking where you just blend in and your life is great. No, I want to raise you up to where you become a people. And I say a people and mind and spirit, okay? That the people that are drawn to you, that the people that the Lord connects you with, your life is undeniable, that the thumbprint of God is on you. The things that you say, like I know exactly somebody who I admire their relationship with God. And I've said things like, there's no way that she can move about in life like that without having a relationship with God. It is undeniable. And I believe that the Lord wanted to make the children of Israel this undeniable, that every land that they conquered the territory, that they were the standard. So set apart and so undeniably chosen by God, that they became who people looked to for advice, for counsel, for thinking. I mean, in this place, I truly believe there's things that God promises in the Bible where he says, seek ye first the kingdom and all these things will be added. There's this like common theme that you realize when you watch how he guided the Israelites and how they reached for things thinking that they weren't significant or thinking the place that they were wasn't enough, failing to realize literally God was in the midst of their life. Like he was, the tabernacle, even creating a dwelling place among his people. Sometimes the place that God has called you is not so that he is that you are restricted from what seems good, but that he would literally indwell within you in your life, that the places that he would take you, you don't have to endure things that other people endure, or there's this ease and this favor about your life it just glows and exudes from you because you've chosen to stay in a place that feels restrictive, but that you trust is good. And I believe that part of what the Lord wanted me to communicate today was not to make you fearful, not to make you worry that you're not doing something right, but just to cause you to come in a conversation with our Father, with our King. What's going on in my life, God? I feel that there's this transition coming, but before I can walk in that fully, there can be no compromise in my life. There can be nothing that has a louder voice than you. There can be no people that have more of an influence over my life than you do. There can be no relationship that is more important to me than mine with you. And again, none of this is just because God wants to sit on a throne and tell you what to do. It is all because he sees that anything that comes in between that will cause you to be a servant for the rest of your life. Unless we come into a place where we're like, God, show me what in my life am I a servant to right now? Or what am I even prone to becoming a servant to? Sometimes I have this thing that God has told me in my life to stay away from. And if I told it to you, you would be like, that sounds so silly. It actually has something to do with what I wear. And he's told me, Deanna, I want you to throw away all of these things. I didn't want to do it because of how I felt when I wore those things. But I didn't realize that just a simple piece of fabric allowed me to be a servant and a slave to a mindset and a way of thinking when God was wanting to raise me higher. Sometimes he'll ask you to do something that seems stupid. How can a pair of shorts or something? In my mind, I was like, I'll just be raw with you guys. There's no reason to hide it from you. It sounds really silly, but it wasn't about the pair of shorts that I would wear when I was working out. It had nothing to do with the fabric. It was the mentality and the bondage that I was walking in as I was wearing those shorts while I was working out. And so sometimes God will ask you to release something, and it's not that there was anything wrong with the shorts or with the people or with the place or with anything that he's asking you to let go of. It's that he sees that there's something that thing, that person, place, thing carries over you that allows you to be a servant. And he said to me, he was like, Deanna, I want you to throw all of your gym shorts away. And I was like, all of them? Like, I'm not gonna have anything to wear. Like, what do I do? And y'all, I've been going to the gym in like baggy, oversized stuff, and it sounds stupid. But I realized that when I would go to the gym wearing certain things, I would do things differently. It was almost like I would become a different person, not true to the person that God was cultivating. And so he said, in order for you to overcome that thing, you need to let it go. And in that, when he told me that, I want you to release it, it just felt silly. I should be able to wear what I want to wear. Like, I don't want to fall into a trap of being a Christian and saying I can't do those things. But there are some people, and I'll give you this as an example. Take this as a grain of salt, okay? There are some people in the Bible, you'll see that wine in itself was not a bad thing, okay? The Lord did a miracle with it. Sometimes you'll see people of God who, entertained alcohol or wine. Wine in itself, let's just stay there, okay? This does not need to be a place of conflict or battle, because it's not even about that. But I know of people in life right now who cannot touch alcohol, not because alcohol, the wine in itself, is bad, but because of the bondage that thing carries over their life. And when they come into communion with that, it causes them to respond in life from a servanthood mentality. And I hope you understand what I'm saying right now. Sometimes it's a person. Sometimes God will say, you cannot go to that place. You cannot entertain this friendship anymore. It's not that the person is bad, but because who you are when you're around them, it causes you to be somebody that I say you are not. Examine your life. Take everything I'm saying here back to God and ask him, is there anything in my life that causes me to be a servant, even if I'm unaware of it? It might sound silly and it might be stupid, but God, I desire communion with you way more than I desire to be seen in athletic shorts in the gym. In my prior life, I say in my prior life, I love fitness. It is, some of the people that follow me here know that I was heavily involved in fitness, being a fitness influencer before. And it was a place where God called me away from, not because the industry in itself was bad, but because I could not walk in the fullness of who he said that I was while being involved with that. And so he called me to delete it, to let it go, to get rid of it. And I still, although I let it go, there were still some things that I carried that allowed me to be in a level of bondage in that place. And sometimes he would say, you can't do this, you can't go here, you can't do this. And it just all seemed restrictive. I'm sure the Israelites felt like that. I'm sure you feel like that sometimes in life. But it's not about the Lord taking from you. It's not about him withholding good things from you. The things that he tells you to release in their essence are just a thing. It's not about them being good or bad. It's just about us being willing to say, if this causes me to be a servant for the rest of my life, if it will cause me to be in bondage that I'm aware of or bondage that I'm unaware of, then I don't want anything to do with it. And I'm willing to go into the gym and wear oversized t-shirts and wear sweatpants. And this is a very silly example, but I want you to understand what I'm saying. Because my mentality when I wear certain things causes me to respond differently. It causes me to perform outside of my original character. And that means more to me than being known for, having great legs and a nice butt. Okay? I wasn't even going to share that with you guys, but I know that being very vulnerable in this place and raw is important. And I want you guys to understand that there's things as the Lord is bringing me deeper with him that he'll ask me to do. And if I was still systematized in my thinking, that I used to think, and the culture that I grew up with was so oppressive in religion, where we couldn't wear shorts, we couldn't wear pants, we couldn't do these things. Sometimes God will allow you to experience something that is in a system. And then when he tells you to do something, it almost feels backwards or contrary to what you know is correct. The example I'm giving you guys is I grew up being told wearing pants is wrong. Wearing shorts is wrong. It's not of God. You can't do this. I know in my spirit that God cares more about my heart than what I wear. I know in my spirit a pair of jeans are not from the devil. I know these things, but then God will ask you to do a thing that contradicts the system that you even contradicted growing up in. He says, don't wear the shorts. I say, okay, I'm not doing this because the shorts are bad. I'm not doing this because I think if somebody wears shorts, they're going to go to hell. That's crazy. I'm doing this because God obviously sees in my life that right now, for the time being, when I involve myself in that thing, it allows me to walk as a servant and not as a child of God. And that keeps me from fullness with him because of the mentality. It has all to do with our mind. Everything that our mind is just powerful. And there's things that we don't even, I'm sure there's something else that God could show me right now where I walk as a servant and not as an heir. That's the difference between the way that we'll walk through life. We have to be in a place where we're willing to release those things. And sometimes that's scary. Sometimes it feels like we're releasing our identity. Who am I without that thing? I even had silly thoughts, you guys, of like when I would go into the gym because I cared so much about what people thought. I'm going to give you this example. How will people know that I'm fit, that I'm athletic, and that I worked very hard for the body that I have if they can't see it? Sometimes, and it's not always the enemy, it's us thinking that we need to look like and be like other people, other things that we've seen, a systematized way of thinking in order to obtain this. The Lord gave me this very clear promise when it came to the realm of the fitness industry, that when it was time for me to step back into that, he would let me know by opening a door that I could not open on my own. And so if I still think that in order for me to walk in the fullness of being effective in the area of fitness, and all of this is an example, apply this to your life, that I am still in that realm of doing things like everyone else does them rules over me. And in response to that, I am a servant to that way of thinking, to think that I have to do things like other people in order to obtain something, when he's said, like the Israelites, you don't need a king in order to have order and structure and rule, in order to have land, in order to infiltrate, in order to be a kingdom. You actually don't need a king ruling over you. These are the things that he was communicating to the Israelites. But they say, that just stood out to me. They said, no, but we will have a king over us, that we may also be like the other nations. It just causes me to think, like, God, what am I doing? What system am I walking in that's causing me to be like everyone else, when you're asking me, when you desire that I am the standard? Yes, that's painful on the way up. Yes, it feels restrictive. But if I get to experience fullness and favor from God and blessing, and get to come into a knowing of who he is, to where my life, people look at my life and say, I don't even have to say anything, but they can say the essence of her, the way that she speaks and the way that she moves, like there's no way that her and God that they're not like this. And I want my life to be like that. So I give you the example of the shorts. But if it means that God has said you cannot do that because of the bondage that you walk in because of a piece of fabric, how silly. Step away from it, let go of it, release it, and trust me. And thinking that you do not need to be seen and established and discovered like others in the way that I will establish you. When I tell y'all I didn't even have notes, I have no notes in front of me. This is none. It was just heavy on my heart. And honestly, I don't even know what I'll call this, but I do think that there's a war in our mind that we face. This whole series has been about not the oppressive state of the enemy, but the wars that we're actually experiencing because of our own mentality, because of sometimes our ignorance. And I say that not in our stupidity, but of our lack of understanding. And I believe with my entire heart that God has not called me to just fall in line, even if that means questioning systematized ways of religion. Something being passed down from a pastor is okay and it is healthy. My pastor, and this is how you know that the person that you are under is submitted to the authority of God. If they always push you to seek the face of the Lord over their wisdom and counsel, you can trust them. My husband actually experienced a situation, I won't go into details, but he was heavily influenced in like serving in the church, and God called him to take a step away from it. And when he went to his spiritual authority, they told him, no, you need to be here. But he knew in his spirit that the Lord was calling him to take a step away. And because he followed God, he was actually rejected by that spiritual leadership. And it was a very ugly situation, but he saw the benefits of having the Lord's voice as the final say over his life, even above people in places of leadership. It doesn't mean that you can't honor them. It's just that if they don't push you to search out the heart of God for yourself, even in this place, when you guys see the things that you admire about my relationship with God, if I don't put you in a place that allows you to stand on my shoulders and go further than I've ever gone, I'll just leave it at that. He wants to have the final say in your life, and it's not because he's authoritative and he's a dictator. It's because when you walk in that, the fullness that comes with that is nothing but blessing. When God says he wants nothing but good things for you, sometimes that comes in the disguise of a command that's uncomfortable. It comes in the release of something that's familiar. I don't know. I've just purposed at this point. I'm like, God, you can tell me to release something extremely painful, and I'm going to probably fuss and fight the whole way through it, but I will let it go. I will release an identity that hinders me from walking in the fullness of you. I want my life to be like where people look at me and they see him. There's no question about it. It is undeniable. Imagine the favor that you walk in that place. Sometimes it comes with no one else ruling over your life, no other voice in your ear. Sometimes it comes with releasing a relationship and being in a wilderness. Sometimes it causes you to be the one in the crowd that's walking the opposite way of everybody else. But it will be worth it. Anyways, I love you guys. I'm going to pray us out because I believe my camera is dying. Yep, I think it's dying. I think I said what I was supposed to say. Lord, bless this and multiply your word here. We thank you for what was done. Father, take the seed that they've heard, plant it deep within them. Help them not to forget this. Help them to come back to it. You can establish this word deep within them. Help them to realize that they don't need anyone over them in order to hear your voice, in order to know you. Help them to understand their position in you. In your name I pray. Bless these things. Amen. Join the Undoing community today. Here you'll find Bible studies, exclusive content, and people who just want to know Jesus. Love you guys.